Ego death leaves you empty. Here's how to find real motivation again. As Carl Jung once said, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." After an ego death, when your old identity dissolves and everything familiar fades, you may feel like a shell of who you once were, disoriented, uninspired, unsure of your next step. But this empty space isn't a void to fear. It's fertile ground for a rebirth of the soul. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore how to find authentic motivation. Again, not the kind rooted in ego or validation, but the kind that aligns with your deeper self. Have you ever experienced this kind of inner death and rebirth? Share your journey in the comments below and let us know how you're rebuilding from the inside out. 1. Ego death is a spiritual collapse of identity. Ego death is not a breakdown. It is a sacred unraveling of everything the ego once clung to for meaning titles, goals, identities, ambitions. It often arrives disguised as a crisis, a heartbreak, a spiritual awakening, or a quiet collapse after years of internal pressure. And when it strikes, the world doesn't end with noise, but with silence. You look around and nothing moves you. The dreams you chased lose their shine. The roles you played feel hollow, and the motivations that once pushed you forward disappear into the stillness. But this isn't failure. It's the soul clearing space. What feels like emptiness is actually a dismantling of illusions, a shedding of borrowed values, and a stripping away of identities that no longer fit your truth. You are not broken. You are being invited into a deeper authenticity, where your drive no longer comes from proving or performing, but from remembering who you are beneath it all. This is why the silence feels so foreign. It's the sound of your soul reclaiming the mic from the ego. At this stage, most people panic. We're conditioned to find comfort in clarity and productivity, so we assume something is wrong when we lose direction. But Carl Jung taught us that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. If you fight this stillness, you prolong the confusion. Instead, sit in it. Let the silence soften your edges. Let it dissolve what was built on fear. What you're experiencing isn't laziness or weakness. It's a recalibration. The ego drove you with urgency and scarcity. The soul moves with resonance and truth. So rather than forcing yourself to set new goals, begin to ask better questions. Not, what should I do now? But what is true for my soul now? You'll notice subtle stirrings, a pull toward nature, toward simplicity, creativity, or service. These whispers are not distractions. They are sacred breadcrumbs leading you home. Follow them without demanding a destination. You are in a season of winter, and winter is not failure, it's rest. Underneath the frozen soil, your soul is composting everything that no longer serves you. It's preparing the ground for new life to emerge. But this life won't be powered by ego. It won't require burnout or self-betrayal. It will be rooted in purpose, joy, and energetic alignment. The drive that returns to you will not feel like pressure. It will feel like peace. Your soul doesn't motivate through fear. It inspires through clarity. And as you allow the old stories to dissolve, you make space for something truer to take root, something born not from the need to be seen, but from the desire to serve. This is not the end. It is a profound beginning, disguised as stillness. You are not lost. You are being reordered. And when your soul is ready, it will rise not to resume the life you had, but to create one that reflects who you've truly become. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything you thought defined you suddenly fell apart? If so, share your journey in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. If you haven't yet faced ego death, but feel it stirring within, comment, "I'm ready to rediscover my soul, and let's walk this spiritual path together." 2. Carl Jung called this the death of the persona. Carl Jung called it the death of the persona, the moment when the mask you've worn to survive, to be accepted, admired, or even just to feel safe, crumbles. It's not a gentle unraveling. It's often a collapse. That identity you performed for the high achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the perfectionist suddenly means nothing. And you're left in the ruins, not with clarity, but with a deafening silence. No goals, no drive, no one applauding. Just a vast, hollow space where your ego used to live. But Jung didn't see this collapse as a failure. He saw it as initiation, because what dies is false, and what survives is the seed of the true self, the soul's unfiltered essence that was buried beneath layers of social masks and unconscious survival strategies. Most people fear this space and try to run back to what's familiar. But the truth is, the void is where your real power lives. In that space of nothingness, there is a spiritual intelligence at work, one that strips away illusions so the soul can finally speak. You might not hear it clearly at first because you've spent years ignoring its voice, numbing it with success, distractions, relationships, and the next big goal. But the soul is patient. It waits in the silence. It waits until you're finally still enough to listen. There's a woman I know who built her whole life around being a powerful executive. She wore her job title like armor. Her calendar was full. Her income was enviable, and her self-worth was tied to how much she could produce. Then, without warning, her position was eliminated in a corporate merger. She told me it felt like she died because everything she thought she was suddenly disappeared. She spiraled. For months, she was numb. No ambition. No idea what to do next. But then something shifted. Not dramatically, but quietly. She began tending a garden. She didn't know why, it just gave her peace. She walked without music. She wrote in her journal, not to achieve clarity, but just to be honest. And from that silence, a new voice emerged. One that was softer, wiser, and strangely familiar. Her soul had always been there, waiting. Today, she runs a nonprofit that teaches mental wellness through gardening. She told me, "I thought I lost my life, but now I see I've just come home to it." Carl Jung believed that the purpose of life wasn't perfection. It was individuation. Not becoming who the world wants you to be, but who your soul was always meant to become. And sometimes, the only way to get there is through the painful, sacred destruction of what no longer serves. Ego death isn't a detour, it's the path. It teaches you that real motivation isn't force, it's alignment. You don't need to chase purpose when your soul becomes the source of it. So if you're lost, stuck, or numb, don't panic. You're not broken. You're becoming. This emptiness isn't a void. It's a womb. It's where the real you starts to take root. And if you can sit in it without running, something extraordinary happens. Your motivation returns, not as noise, but as knowing. You stop trying to prove your worth, and you start living from it. You no longer ask, "What should I do?" But instead, "What is ready to move through me?" That's the shift from ego to soul. And once you taste it, there's no going back. 3. The post-ego death void feels like a loss of drive. After an ego death, what you're feeling isn't a lack of ambition, it's a spiritual detox. You're not broken or lazy, you're simply no longer willing to run on false fuel. The identity you used to fight so hard to maintain has collapsed, and with it, all the shallow motivations that once lit your fire have burned out. What you're experiencing is not failure, it's recalibration. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And now, in this silence, you're being asked to act not from your wounds, but from your soul. The external goals that used to energize you, titles, recognition, even survival instincts, suddenly feel irrelevant because they were never aligned with your spiritual truth. And that can leave you feeling lost, as if the map has been erased and no new path has appeared. But the truth is, this stillness is the path. This quiet space is not empty. It's sacred. It's the birthplace of soul-based action, where you're no longer chasing something to become someone, but allowing your spirit to move you into what already belongs to you. The mind panics in this phase because it's addicted to noise, structure, control, but the soul? It waits patiently for the noise to settle so it can finally speak. This is why so many people feel a deep fatigue after awakening, not because they lack energy, but because their energy can no longer be used for anything inauthentic. You can't unsee what you've seen, and you can't force yourself back into the matrix of ego-driven hustle once you've touched the truth. You may look around and feel like you've fallen behind, while others keep climbing ladders you've already seen lead nowhere. But this is where you must trust your spiritual instincts over societal programming. Real motivation now comes from something quieter, but infinitely stronger. It comes from alignment. You begin to crave peace more than praise, impact more than attention, and purpose more than power. Slowly, you'll find your energy returning, not to do more, but to do what matters. You'll be drawn to things that nourish you deeply. Honest conversations, meaningful creativity, nature, healing, service, stillness. And these things might not look productive to the outside world, but they are profoundly regenerative to your soul. This phase isn't about rebuilding a shinier version of your old self. It's about becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. And that process is deeply spiritual. It requires patience, courage, and compassion toward yourself as you release the drive to perform and rediscover the joy of simply being. You're not here to impress the world. You're here to embody your truth. So let yourself rest without guilt, dream without limits, and act only from the energy of love, not fear. Because when your soul leads, you don't need motivation. You move naturally, with grace, with clarity, and with a quiet power that cannot be shaken. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more soul-shifting insights like this. If you're ready to step out of the void and take action from your higher self, type in the comments, "I choose soul-based motivation." 4. True motivation after ego death comes from the soul. True motivation doesn't erupt from noise, pressure, or public applause. It rises slowly from the soul, in the quiet spaces where your ego no longer dictates your worth. After ego death, when your old identity is crumbled and the roles you once played no longer make sense, you're not meant to rush into new goals or force direction from the mind. Instead, this hollow silence invites you to feel, to listen deeply, to what is real within you. The soul speaks not in commands, but in resonance in the subtle pull of intuition, the magnetic charge of synchronicity, and the quiet inner voice that asks you to stop performing and start honoring your truth. Carl Jung said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This is the awakening the soul waits for. Real motivation comes not from fixing yourself, but from surrendering to what has always been inside you, unmasked, unfiltered, unseen. When you stop resisting how you feel, when you allow sadness, confusion, or emptiness to breathe, your repressed emotions begin to reveal their hidden wisdom. That is your shadow, not something to fear or fight, but something to understand, because within it lies your authentic energy and creativity. The shadow carries all the forgotten pieces of your truth, and only by integrating it can you reclaim the motivation that doesn't burn out or vanish when no one's watching. There's a man who once lost everything: his job, his status, his self-image. At first, he collapsed into despair, but as he sat in the stillness, no longer chasing or pretending, he began to write, walk, and follow quiet nudges from his inner world. Life began to speak to him again, not through big wins, but through meaningful connections, spontaneous clarity, and a new sense of peace. This was not ego-driven productivity. It was soul-led alignment. Motivation returned, not as a rush to prove something, but as a calm urge to live honestly. That is what happens when the soul leads. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. When you stop trying to become someone and start being who you are without defense, everything changes. The emptiness you fear is not a void. It is sacred space, ready to be filled with what's real. And in that space, a new kind of energy is born. Not the kind that needs to be fueled by hustle or fear, but the kind that sustains you because it is rooted in truth. Your soul knows the way forward, not in steps or strategies, but in feelings, symbols, and the wisdom of your own being. When you follow that, you don't need motivation. You become it. 5. Resistance to feeling is the real drain. You've been told to hustle harder, to shake off the tiredness and get back on track. But the truth, as Carl Jung so wisely understood, is that the real energy drain isn't your workload or a lack of ambition. It's the war you're silently waging against your own emotions. What exhausts you isn't what you're doing, it's what you're suppressing. Shame, confusion, sadness, these aren't weaknesses to be overcome. They're signals trying to guide you back to your soul. But instead of listening, you tighten your jaw, push through the pain, smile when you want to scream, and wonder why you feel so empty. Resistance doesn't give you strength. It steals your life force. And the moment you stop resisting and finally allow yourself to feel truly, deeply, without trying to fix or justify, it's like a door quietly opens within you, and behind it is something more powerful than ambition. Healing. Feeling is healing, and what you've been calling laziness or burnout may just be your soul's cry for stillness, for a sacred pause that the ego fears, but your spirit desperately needs. You see it in everyday life. The man who works non-stop after a divorce, the woman who starts a new project every month but can't find peace, the spiritual seeker who reads 100 books yet still feels lost. They're not broken, they're avoiding the fall. But the fall is necessary. Ego death isn't just a spiritual metaphor. It's what happens when your old identity crumbles and you're left staring at a blank slate. At first, it feels liberating, but then comes the silence, the in-between space where there's no role to perform, no mask to wear. That's where most people panic. They try to resurrect the old self by forcing motivation, setting goals, or faking confidence. But Carl Jung taught that what you run from becomes your prison. If you truly want to move forward, you must stop escaping the emptiness and begin to befriend it. Sit with the sadness. Welcome the confusion. Let the fatigue wash over you without labeling it as weakness, because beneath those emotions is your soul, patiently waiting for you to stop pretending and start listening. The truth is, real motivation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from presence. It returns when you stop trying to be who you were and start allowing yourself to be who you are becoming. This isn't about giving up. It's about surrendering to a deeper intelligence within you, one that doesn't operate on external rewards, but on internal truth. That void you feel isn't a dead end, it's a womb. Something new is forming, and just like winter precedes spring, your stillness is preparing you for a rebirth. So the next time you feel like you've lost your fire, ask yourself if maybe you've just stopped resisting long enough to finally feel what needs to be felt. And in that quiet, something sacred begins to stir. Not motivation rooted in fear or approval, but the kind of soul-driven momentum that flows naturally once you're aligned with your inner truth. Let your feelings be the bridge back to yourself. Let them teach you, guide you, soften you. When you stop seeing them as the enemy, you'll find they were always the doorway to your freedom. If this message touched something deep within you, leave a comment of truth. I allow myself to feel fully. I trust that healing comes through surrender. 6. Creativity is born in paradox. Creativity is born in paradox, not perfection. In the spiritual aftermath of ego death, when the identity you once clung to dissolves and leaves behind a deafening silence, you're not broken. You're being reassembled by something deeper. The emptiness you feel isn't a void to fear, but a space pregnant with potential, waiting for your soul to speak without the interference of the ego's demands. Instead of escaping the discomfort, you are being invited to alchemize it, to turn emotional rawness into something beautiful through writing, painting, movement, or even stillness. Laziness, when understood through the lens of spiritual exhaustion, becomes a quiet rebellion against the productivity myth and a signal that your inner world is rebuilding itself. Fear, once paralyzing, now becomes the very arena where courage is forged. Sadness isn't your enemy. It's the sacred softness that makes your soul porous enough to feel life again. Carl Jung said, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." And now you're living that paradox, falling apart and coming alive at the same time. Children do this naturally. They express without censorship. A child who's hurt cries. A child who feels joy dances. But adults, we suppress, we filter, we pretend. And in doing so, we choke the voice of the soul. The soul thrives not on perfection, but on expression. And the more honest that expression is, the more powerful its transformation. This is not the time to strive, force, or rebuild the ego just to feel productive again. This is the time to let silence reorganize you, to let the unknown shape you. Don't run from the void, stand in it. Let it echo until something stirs within you, something you didn't script or plan. but something that feels like truth. Your next chapter won't be born from your old self's ambitions, but from your willingness to be empty long enough to hear your soul's quiet whisper. If you feel numb, it's because your system is recalibrating. If you feel lost, it's because the map you used no longer applies. And maybe that's the real miracle, because now you get to draw a new one. One that isn't about becoming someone impressive, but someone real. One that isn't fueled by ego, but by the sacred fire of spiritual authenticity. So write when it hurts. Create when you're confused. Sit in silence when nothing makes sense. This is how the soul learns to speak again, not through noise or external achievement, but through honoring the spiritual invitation hidden in discomfort. The ego's death is not your end. It's the beginning of the only motivation that truly matters, the one that rises from your soul, not your image. 7. Jung's self is the totality of who you are. Most people don't realize that after ego death, what you're experiencing isn't a lack of motivation. It's a complete shift in the source of it. The old version of you, driven by approval, success, or competition, no longer exists, and the soul refuses to be fueled by fear-based incentives. What you're feeling now isn't laziness, it's a spiritual reset. Carl Jung called this deeper dimension of you the self, which includes your conscious identity, your hidden shadow, your unhealed wounds, your divine potential, and everything your soul came here to embody. The self does not speak in logic or linear thought. It communicates through symbols, emotions, dreams, inner impulses, synchronicities, and a deep sense of knowing that cannot be explained. When your ego dies, your soul begins to speak, but at first, you don't understand its language. And that's why everything feels numb, confusing, or void-like. You're not broken, you're being recalibrated. Motivation no longer comes from chasing results. It comes from alignment when your actions resonate with your inner truth. That's why something as simple as painting, walking in nature, or writing a sentence that feels raw and real can suddenly give you more energy than an entire career ever did. The soul doesn't want you to hustle. It wants you to harmonize. It doesn't want you to perform. It wants you to embody. The real you is not meant to fight for significance. The real you is meant to radiate significance just by being fully yourself. This is why so many people who go through ego death find themselves uninterested in their former goals. They weren't soul goals, they were survival goals. And now, your soul is asking new questions. What feels alive? What brings peace? What calls to me, even when no one's watching? Jung said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." This is not just about hearing your soul, it's about obeying it. Trust the silence, because in that silence is your blueprint. In that pause is where true vision forms. And from that vision, real motivation will rise not to prove, not to earn, not to fix, but to live fully, truthfully, and spiritually aligned. If this message resonates with your soul, say it with faith. I trust the voice within me. I am aligned with my true self, and it is guiding me forward. 8. Rebuilding after ego death requires integration, not rejection of ego. After ego death, the silence that follows is not peace, it's disorientation. You wake up and realize that everything you once chased, titles, praise, approval, no longer fuels you. The drive is gone, but not because you're lazy or broken. It's because the why behind your actions was never yours to begin with. Carl Jung never saw the ego as something evil. He saw it as a necessary structure, but one that must serve the self, the deepest, most authentic part of you, not dominate it. That's the part most people miss. They think ego death means erasing the ego completely. But the truth is, the ego isn't meant to disappear. It's meant to transform. In our modern world, we're conditioned to build our lives around survival. Earn more, do more, prove more. But that kind of motivation is brittle. When the persona you constructed collapses, there's a terrifying freedom. You have no idea who you are without your hustle, without your image. But this is also the sacred doorway, because now you can begin to create from your soul, not from fear. You begin to rebuild, not with desperation, but with honesty. You choose work that feels meaningful, not just profitable. You structure your life around truth, not validation. You move from performance to presence. Take someone like Mia on the surface. She had it all. A high-paying corporate job, a polished life, a busy calendar. But behind closed doors, she was unraveling panic attacks, exhaustion, a creeping numbness she couldn't shake. Then came the collapse. A health scare forced her to stop. For weeks, she couldn't move, couldn't plan, couldn't even pretend to care about the job she once lived for. But in that stillness, she didn't lose herself. She met her real self. She didn't destroy her ego. She rewired it. She used her same strength strategy, leadership, communication, but this time to build something that mattered. A consultancy that helped holistic wellness startups grow. Her soul finally had a seat at the table. And this is the turning point for anyone walking through ego death. You don't have to abandon who you were. You simply have to realign it. Your ego must become the servant, not the master. When it does, you stop living from pressure and start living from presence. You stop chasing and start listening. Carl Jung taught that integration is the path, not rejection. You don't silence your ambition, you purify it. You don't erase your identity, you let it evolve. When your soul begins to lead and your ego learns to follow, a quiet, steady motivation returns. It's not frantic, it's not addictive, it's grounded, it sustains you. The lesson here is simple. Your ego was never the problem. It was your relationship to it. Retrain it. Refocus it. Let it serve the life your spirit actually came here to live. And in that space, you won't just find motivation, you'll find meaning. 9. Spiritual growth doesn't mean bypassing life. Spiritual growth doesn't mean escaping reality or abandoning daily obligations. You still have responsibilities, people who count on you, and a life to tend to. But now, you approach it all from a different frequency, one that's rooted in soul instead of ego. After an ego death, it may feel like the drive that once pushed you is suddenly gone. You're not chasing validation. You're not hustling to outrun your own insecurities. And the familiar fuel of fear and pressure no longer lights your fire. That emptiness can feel disorienting, even terrifying, because it's not just the end of your old motivations, it's the collapse of a false identity. But in truth, it's the beginning of something far more powerful, a spiritual awakening that invites you to act from alignment rather than ambition. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that becoming begins when you stop performing and start listening to the quiet, unshakable wisdom within. You no longer ask, "What do I need to do to be enough?" But instead, "What is my soul asking of me today?" That question changes everything. Your actions shift from proving to expressing, from chasing to channeling, from pressure to presence. There's no longer a desperate need to control outcomes or curate appearances. Instead, your motivation arises naturally from the desire to serve, to contribute, to create beauty and meaning, not because you have to, but because it's who you are. Like the man who spent decades climbing the corporate ladder only to feel hollow at the top, it often takes a profound loss or inner collapse to awaken this truth. When his ego shattered after the death of a loved one, he wandered for months in a fog, stripped of the identity that once defined him. But from that spiritual silence, a new impulse emerged, not to accumulate, but to give. He started offering financial education to disadvantaged youth, not for recognition, but because it felt real, true, and deeply aligned. That's what post-ego motivation looks like. It's quiet, steady, and comes from the soul. You're no longer moved by applause, but by authenticity. Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now you see clearly. You're not driven by unconscious wounds. You're guided by conscious presence. Every action becomes sacred, not because it's grand, but because it's genuine. You begin to move through the world not as someone trying to be more, but as someone remembering who they were all along. Your energy becomes intentional. Your work becomes art. Your presence becomes your purpose. That is spiritual motivation, not performance, but presence. Not urgency, but alignment. Not noise, but the quiet courage to answer the soul's call. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on how to live grounded and aligned, where your daily life becomes an authentic expression of your inner growth, not an escape from it. 10. Wholeness is the goal. They say you don't find your soul in comfort. You uncover it in the quiet ruins of who you thought you were. When the ego collapses, when the masks fall away, and the roles we clung to dissolve into silence, what's left behind is not a void, it's a sacred beginning. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that process, as beautiful as it is, often begins in the most disorienting of places. Sadness that weighs you down like fog, laziness that robs you of motivation, confusion that scrambles everything you once thought made sense. But these aren't signs that you're broken. They're not obstacles. They're messengers from your inner world, bearing the wisdom your soul has been whispering for years. This is where real spiritual growth begins, not by fixing yourself, but by finally listening. Your sadness may be showing you the depth of what you've neglected emotionally. Your inertia may be protecting you from running back into the arms of false ambition. Your confusion may be urging you to stop searching for external meaning and finally meet yourself where you are. These aren't symptoms of failure. They are signals of becoming. That ego death you endured, whether through loss, awakening, heartbreak, or spiritual crisis, did not destroy you. It dismantled the illusion, the roles, the identity, the old motivations. They were masks. And now that they're gone, your soul has space to rise. This new version of you doesn't emerge with fireworks and applause. It comes like a whisper, a subtle pull toward what feels real, simple, and sincere. Wholeness, not perfection, is the goal now. And wholeness requires you to embrace every part of you, especially the ones you once judged or feared. The soul is not in a hurry. It speaks in rhythms, not deadlines. It leads you inward before it calls you forward. So instead of fighting your fatigue, ask what it's trying to teach. Instead of shaming your sadness, sit with it and ask what truth it's been carrying. Real motivation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from alignment. It comes when the soul feels safe enough to speak again. It comes when you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin asking, "What wants to move through me?" As Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This moment of emptiness is not your end. It is your opening. Let it be soft. Let it be honest. Let it be spiritual. Because what you're searching for now isn't a goal. It's a relationship with your own soul. And that, above all else, is worth waiting for. If this message helped you see your emotions not as blocks, but as guides toward your true self, comment below. I trust my inner signals. Your journey to wholeness matters. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another step on this path of deep spiritual wisdom. And as you continue walking this path, after ego death stripped of illusions, yet closer to your truth, remember this. Motivation doesn't come from chasing your old self, but from honoring the soul you're becoming. You are not broken. You are being reborn with deeper awareness and greater purpose. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the mind, the soul, and the power within. Your transformation is just beginning. Why spiritually awakened people are untouchable. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. Carl Jung. This timeless truth lies at the heart of today's message. On Spiritual Wisdom, we're diving into why spiritually awakened people become untouchable, not because they avoid life's chaos, but because they've learned to master their inner world. As you watch, reflect on your own spiritual journey. What makes you resilient? What inner strength keeps you grounded? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you're applying these insights in your daily life to grow and thrive. 1. True power is inner stillness amid chaos. Spiritually awakened people are not immune to life's storms. They've simply learned how to weather them without being internally destroyed. While others react, spiral, or collapse, the awakened stand like ancient mountains. The winds of judgment may howl, rejection may strike like lightning, and chaos may swirl in every direction, yet their soul remains unmoved. This strength is not born of ignorance or denial, but of deep, conscious presence. It is the result of doing the inner work, confronting trauma, peeling back illusions, integrating the shadow, and stepping fully into their spiritual identity. They are not numb. They are awake. They do not escape pain. They have befriended it. Because of this, the storm passes through them, but it never defines them. Carl Jung understood this rare power when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." The spiritually untouchable have stopped outsourcing their stability to things they cannot control. Their power no longer hinges on the approval of others, the predictability of life, or the outcomes they once obsessed over. They have taken back the reins from their ego and handed them to their soul. And once the soul leads, chaos loses its grip. These people are not reactionary. They are intentional. They no longer beg for peace from the outside world because they've built an entire sanctuary within. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's mastery. Their stillness isn't weakness, it's clarity. And their calm in the middle of chaos isn't luck. It's a spiritual frequency they chose to embody through fire. They have faced betrayal and chosen healing over revenge. They have encountered loss and chosen surrender over bitterness. They have walked through loneliness and transformed it into solitude. Their strength is invisible to those who only understand dominance, noise, and power games. But those with eyes to see will feel the difference. You cannot manipulate a soul that knows its worth. You cannot destabilize someone who has faced the abyss and chosen to rise. You cannot control someone who has nothing to prove and no desire to perform. The spiritually untouchable are not hard, they are whole. And wholeness doesn't shatter, it expands. This level of being is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to anyone willing to go deep enough, anyone willing to stop running and start listening to their wounds, their intuition, their soul. Because the truth is, stillness is not the absence of movement. It's the presence of rootedness. It's the fierce clarity that remains even as everything else changes. And in that stillness, in that quiet power, the world may rage, but it can never reach the core. Have you ever faced chaos and remained completely still inside? If yes, share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else. If not, simply comment, "I will find my stillness," and let's walk this path of inner power together. 2. Power lies in awareness, not external control. Carl Jung taught that the outer world only has power over you because you surrender your awareness to it. When you stop giving your attention, your peace, your self-worth to external noise, you take back something far more powerful than control. You reclaim sovereignty over your soul. The spiritually awakened don't seek dominance over others. They seek freedom from the need to be validated, understood, or accepted. They don't waste energy chasing applause or avoiding criticism. They've outgrown the illusion that their value depends on external opinion. Instead, they master the only thing that truly belongs to them, their inner world. And that's why they are untouchable. They can walk into chaos and remain centered. They can be lied about, rejected, or misunderstood and still move with grace, because their worth isn't on trial anymore. I knew a man who lost his job, his marriage, and his health in the span of 1 year. Everything that once defined him vanished. But instead of collapsing, he turned inward. He started journaling. He began reading Carl Jung, meditating every morning, questioning every identity he used to cling to. And over time, something shifted. He stopped seeing himself as a victim of life and started seeing himself as a participant in a sacred process. He realized that every loss had stripped away something false, something that wasn't truly his. When he finally returned to the world, he didn't come back desperate to prove himself. He walked differently, spoke slower, didn't need to be liked. There was a calm authority about him that made people pause. He became a mirror for others, reflecting not what they wanted to see, but what they needed to face. That's the essence of spiritual awakening. You stop living to be accepted, and you start living from a place of truth. Carl Jung believe that transformation isn't about becoming something new, but remembering what you've always been. You don't need to fight the world when you're no longer at war with yourself. And that's where real power lives, not in controlling others, but in mastering your own reactions, your thoughts, your focus. When you learn to stay rooted even when storms come, when you refuse to let others decide how you feel about yourself, you become immune to manipulation. You stop being a puppet on emotional strings. This doesn't mean you're cold or disconnected. In fact, it's the opposite. You become deeply present, fully alive, and compassionately aware. But nothing owns you anymore. Your soul belongs to you again. And that quiet, unwavering clarity is what makes the awakened so rare, so powerful, and so deeply untouchable. Did this message resonate with you? If so, comment, "I reclaim my power below," to affirm your awareness, and let's keep growing together on this inner journey. 3. The shadow holds the key to liberation. Carl Jung taught that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. And nowhere is this more true than with the shadow of the hidden self that lives beneath your surface, carrying your unspoken fears, suppressed rage, forgotten wounds, and repressed desires. The shadow is not your enemy, it's your mirror. Most people live their lives in fear of what they might find if they look too deeply into themselves. They numb, they distract, they blame others, because facing their own pain feels unbearable. But spiritually awakened people take a different path. They stop running, they turn inward, they sit with the discomfort. They recognize that true spiritual growth does not come from pretending to be good, but from integrating what is broken, unwanted, and unloved within. And in that integration, they find a power that cannot be shaken. You don't need to be perfect to be free. You need to be whole. And wholeness only comes when you embrace the parts of yourself that you were once taught to hide. When you bring your shadow into the light, something extraordinary happens. The pain you feared becomes your teacher. The anger you buried becomes your boundary. The fear you silenced becomes your intuition. What once seemed like weakness transforms into strength because it is no longer controlling you from the dark. Spiritually awakened people become untouchable, not because they are emotionally numb, but because they are emotionally sovereign. They have walked through their inner hell and returned wiser, calmer, and more grounded. They no longer react impulsively when triggered, because they understand the root of those triggers. They don't project their wounds onto others, because they've already met those wounds with compassion. When someone tries to manipulate them using guilt or shame, it doesn't work, because they've reclaimed those parts of themselves and no longer hand over their power. In modern life, this transformation might look like choosing silence over drama, understanding over judgment, or presence over performance. Imagine someone tries to insult you, push your buttons, make you doubt yourself, but you've already faced that critical voice within and dismantled it. Their words slide off like water. That is the mark of someone who has integrated their shadow. They are no longer fighting their own reflection, and so no external enemy can win. As Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The spiritually awakened stop calling it fate, they start calling it choice. And this choice is made every day. To pause instead of lash out, to reflect instead of react, to heal instead of blame. Shadow work is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong devotion to truth, a commitment to peeling back the layers of illusion until all that remains is the raw, radiant soul. Spiritual liberation is not about detachment from the world. It's about connection to yourself. When you no longer fear your shadow, you begin to live without masks. You stop seeking external validation because your worth is no longer conditional. You walk into rooms not needing to prove anything because your energy already speaks for you. That energy, the one shaped by truth, grounded in self-knowledge and rooted in spiritual awareness, is what makes you untouchable. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. And the more you align, the more others feel it. They can't define you, label you, or confine you because you've already done the sacred work of defining yourself. This is the power of shadow integration. It doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how the world sees you. 4. Becoming whole makes you untouchable. When you embrace both your light and your shadow, you stop being at war with yourself, and that inner peace makes you immune to the chaos of the world. True spiritual awakening is not about escaping the darkness, but integrating it, learning from it, and allowing it to deepen your soul. You become whole not by denying your pain, but by facing it with courage and compassion. Carl Jung taught us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's not just a quote, it's a revelation. Because until you sit with your wounds, they will control you. But when you heal them, when you transform unconscious patterns into conscious awareness, you reclaim your power. You no longer respond out of fear, trauma, or the need for validation. You act from alignment, from soul clarity, from a space that cannot be manipulated. And that's what makes you untouchable, not because you avoid conflict, but because conflict no longer decides who you are. The world loses its grip on you the moment you stop needing it to understand you. You no longer shrink to fit into places that dishonor your spirit. You stop over-explaining your truth to those committed to misunderstanding it. People may still project their wounds onto you, but you won't absorb them. Their judgments become background noise to your inner knowing. You hold space for them without losing yourself in their storm. That's real power, the kind of power that doesn't dominate, but simply refuses to be shaken. When your soul becomes your home, external approval becomes irrelevant. You walk into rooms differently. You speak less, but your presence says everything. You stop reacting to the world, and instead, you begin shaping it with your energy, your boundaries, and your vision. You become a lighthouse not by force, but by radiating light from the depth of your being. And those who haven't yet met their own darkness will feel unsettled by your calm, because your stillness reflects the inner noise they haven't yet faced. But that's not your burden to carry. Your path is sacred. It's the path of individuation, the spiritual journey of becoming a whole soul. Not perfect, but present. Not always understood, but deeply rooted. This is the transformation Jung pointed to, the evolution from a fragmented self into a unified one. And once you become whole, no storm, no rejection, no betrayal can dismantle you, because you no longer depend on the external to confirm the internal. Your value is not up for negotiation. Your peace is not available for purchase. You've met the darkest parts of yourself and chosen to love them back into the light. That's why nothing can control you anymore. Not people, not fear, not even your past. You become the observer, not the prisoner. You become the alchemist, not the victim. You move through the world grounded, knowing your soul is your compass, and as long as you follow it, you remain untouchable. If you found these insights meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's keep uncovering the power that comes from embracing your whole self. 5. 3 practical steps to build inner strength. Carl Jung once said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration, by seeing, holding, and transforming all that you are. That's exactly what spiritual strength is, not the absence of pain, but the presence of awareness. The first step in cultivating this strength is to become the observer. Instead of reacting blindly when life throws you into emotional chaos, pause, breathe deeply. Ask yourself, what within me is being touched? This moment of stillness is sacred. It's where your soul speaks louder than your wounds. Visualization can help. Imagine a clear space within your mind where you are untouched by judgment or fear. This isn't about escaping your feelings, but witnessing them without drowning. The chaos around you can only consume you if it finds chaos within you. When you create this internal space, even the loudest storms lose their power over you. Observation turns you from a victim of emotion into a conscious participant in your own evolution. But observation must lead to rootedness. This is where the second step comes in, strengthening your inner core. In a world that constantly tells you who to be, the most powerful act is to define yourself. Write down what you believe in, what you value, what you stand for no matter what. This personal manifesto becomes your spiritual anchor. When others project their fears or judgments onto you, you no longer bend or shrink. You remain centered because you are aligned with your truth. Carl Jung emphasized individuation, the process of becoming uniquely and fully yourself, as the highest task of the soul. Without it, we live in fragments, forever seeking validation. With it, we walk in silent power. Your identity isn't found in roles or titles, but in the quiet knowing of your worth. Just as a tree is not weakened by the storm when its roots go deep, you too become unshakable when rooted in authenticity. And yet, even the most grounded soul must face pain. The third step is the alchemical work of transforming negative energy. Every emotion, no matter how painful, contains sacred data. When you are hurt, journal the experience, not just the event, but the feelings, the reactions, the stories it triggered. Ask yourself, what is the wisdom here? Instead of labeling anger or grief as weakness, treat them as messages from the soul asking to be heard. Carl Jung taught that the path to light leads through the shadow, not around it. Enlightenment isn't about pretending you're above emotion, it's about integrating it consciously. When you learn to reframe your pain as an invitation to grow, you no longer run from it, you use it. And this daily practice of emotional transmutation becomes your spiritual discipline. You're no longer reacting, you're remembering who you are beneath every trigger, beneath every wound. In truth, spiritual strength is a quiet force. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove. It observes. It anchors. It transforms. It allows you to walk through a world of chaos untouched, not because you've escaped pain, but because you've made peace with it. This is the essence of becoming untouchable, not by armor, but by soul. As you take these 3 practical steps to build inner strength, remember every moment of self-awareness is a step toward emotional mastery. If you're ready to rise above reaction and anchor into your true power, comment below. I'm building my strength from within. Your presence here shows your commitment to growth. Let's continue walking this path together. 6. Jung's hidden philosophy, psychological freedom. Carl Jung's hidden philosophy reveals a spiritual truth that is both radical and liberating. Real psychological freedom doesn't come from controlling the world outside. It comes from aligning so deeply with your soul that the noise of the world no longer defines you. Spiritually awakened people are not immune because they're detached or indifferent, but because they've returned to the deepest parts of themselves, to their truth, and to a state of inner integration. Jung didn't teach escape, he taught wholeness. He believed that when we confront our shadows, our fears, our buried wounds, and integrate them rather than run from them, we reclaim the fragmented parts of the self that make us whole. That's the spiritual path, not one of perfection, but of authenticity. As Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. Wholeness means you become untouchable, not because you don't feel, but because you no longer fall apart. The moment you begin to walk in alignment with your soul, your energy shifts. You are no longer controlled by opinions, by rejection, by praise, or by expectation. You respond rather than react. You listen without needing to defend. You observe without absorbing every emotion around you. And this is what makes spiritually awakened people so powerful. They operate from a center within, not from chaos without. In a world addicted to attention and validation, their quiet confidence unsettles others. While most people chase approval to feel worthy, they've already found their worth in their own spiritual essence. This makes them resistant to manipulation, immune to gaslighting, and sovereign in how they protect their peace. The storms may still come, but the storm no longer lives inside them. You see it in their eyes, calm, clear, unbothered. You hear it in their voice, measured, grounded, free of the need to convince. Their aura feels like still water, undisturbed by external splashes. And it's not because life has been easy, but because they've done the inner work to face the fires and rise from the ashes. When the world tried to tell them who they should be, they chose to remember who they really are. That remembering, that sacred return, makes them untouchable, not in ego, but in soul. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. It's not resistance, it's transcendence. And when you get to that place, you don't just survive chaos, you become the calm in the middle of it. You feel heartbreak, but don't lose your identity. You face betrayal and choose grace instead of revenge. You lose people and gain deeper clarity. You stop begging the world to understand you because you finally understood yourself. That's the unseen power Jung pointed to. When you are no longer fragmented inside, the world outside cannot fracture you. You are whole. You are awake. You are spiritual. And that makes you untouchable. 7. Final message. You are the mountain. You were never meant to be the storm. You were always the mountain. And those who awaken spiritually come to embody that truth, not through resistance, but through radical inner stillness. The soul does not roar to prove its power. It stands, silent and unbothered, while the world howls around it. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And that awakening isn't loud, it's profound. It's the quiet mastery of energy, of reaction, of presence. A spiritually awakened person does not react from wounds. They respond from awareness. They've trained their soul to become the observer, not the reactor. Life will still shake, storms will still come, and people will still misunderstand them. But their peace is no longer negotiable. Because their center no longer depends on what happens around them, it flows from what lives within. The awakened do not seek control over others, they seek mastery over self. They no longer exhaust their soul trying to fix chaos. Instead, they rise above it by not participating in it. They understand that protecting their peace doesn't require explanation. They are no longer offended by projections, accusations, or silence. Their energy no longer leaks into battles that don't feed their soul. They have remembered that every storm is temporary, but their presence is eternal. That's why nothing outside can truly touch them. They don't build walls. They build energetic boundaries that are so clear, so firm, so rooted, that anything not aligned simply fades away. Their soul doesn't armor up with pride. It glows with discernment. There is no need to convince, defend, or chase. What is meant for them flows effortlessly. What is not simply dissolves. In every moment, they choose stillness over reaction, intention over impulse, grace over chaos. They've stopped explaining their path to people who don't understand the language of the soul. Their life becomes a silent revolution, not of noise, but of depth. And that depth terrifies the shallow. That clarity confuses the chaotic. Their stillness feels like a threat to those addicted to drama, but they do not shrink to make others comfortable. They no longer apologize for their healing. They no longer dim their soul just to belong, because they've realized peace is not passive. It's the result of 1,000 inner battles no one ever saw. And that peace is what makes them untouchable. Not because they are disconnected from the world, but because they are finally connected to themselves. The world will keep spinning, storms will still rise, but they, like the mountain, will remain, rooted in presence, aligned with soul, unmoved by noise. And that is their quiet power. To honor your inner stillness and strength, declare your truth. Comment below, "I am the mountain," to affirm your unshakable spirit and inspire others to rise in their own power. If this message speaks to you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. And so, as you begin to embody the calm within the storm, remember this: true spiritual awakening isn't about escaping the world. It's about becoming untouchable within it. Carl Jung taught us that when we integrate the shadow and align with our inner truth, no external force can destabilize us. You are no longer reacting. You are responding with clarity, depth, and purpose. The storm may rage, but you remain unshaken. If this message resonated with your soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss the deep truths and powerful insights we share in upcoming videos. Until next time, walk in peace and remain grounded in your spiritual power.